Hey, Made in America listeners. Whether this is your first show or you've been with us for 5 years, thank you so much for joining us. Please spread the word about what we're doing and the great things that are happening in manufacturing with somebody you know. Hey, it's Ari. Welcome to another episode of the Made in America podcast. Today, I'm with Owen Polzello, VP of Operations for Park City Packaging. Owen, thanks so much for coming on today.
Yeah, excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome, man. But it's the Made in America podcast, so we always start off with the same two questions. What do you make and why do you make it?
So we make specialty packaging products for aerospace and industrial applications, anything all the way from corrugated boxes through wood crates, foam products, barrier bag material. And we make those things because if companies can't get their parts to the end user, then they don't have a business, right?
Yeah, it's really good.
It's one of the most simple problems in manufacturing, right? So we work with small, medium, and large manufacturing companies, helping them to do just that, making sure that wherever their parts are going, whether it's an airport somewhere far away, whether it's troops forward deployed in theater, that they get the parts that they need in good condition, ready to use.
Wow, that makes so much sense. And I think, one of the things that I wanted to sort of start off with, because I think people might be listening to this thinking what I thought of when we were first introduced,
Sure.
Which was like, don't people just go to the UPS store and get boxes? Or like, don't they just have like boxes? Can they just buy corrugated cardboard boxes and fill them with those like peanuts and whatnot and get them out? But that really isn't the case.
No. And especially, I mean, like I said, we deal with a lot of very specialty items, right? So sensitive jet engine components, sensitive electronic components and things like that. And you're welcome to try and throw that in a crate full of packing peanuts, but I don't know if whoever's opening it on the other end is going to like you very much. So they trust us to get it right. We manufacture all the materials in-house. We have the technical know-how and also the compliance understanding. And quite frankly, a long working history with a lot of these big aerospace companies. And we leverage all that to deliver value and make sure that everything gets where it's going in one piece.
There you go.
Yeah.
So is it mostly aerospace parts that drives what you guys are doing, or what else do you serve?
Yeah, heavy focus in aerospace. Like I said, in service of Pratt & Whitney, Sikorsky, companies like that. And then a lot of what we do is also destined for military application. So of course, a big aerospace component there, but you also have land and sea. So we do stuff for the Army, stuff for the Navy. We really, we see everything.
And so you're working for not really the Army, the Navy directly, but more for the suppliers that make stuff for them.
Exactly. So prime contractors who are either doing business with one of the big aerospace OEMs or people who are selling to the government. The compliance piece, the compliance understanding is a big part of what we offer, especially to the people selling to the military. A lot of barriers to entry there. You have to be labeled a certain way, all the compliance, and they trust us with that.
Yeah, well, listen, it's nice to have like a specialty, which certainly you guys have built. So before we sort of get into what the company's up to today, just a little bit of history. Sounds like the company's been around for a while, maybe longer than you've been around.
Yeah, I would say so. So we were founded in Bridgeport in 1953. My grandfather purchased the business in 1987. And then when he purchased it, we expanded into 2 locations, Bridgeport and Stratford. And then in 1998, we had our first expansion down south, where we opened a plant in South Carolina, just outside Greenville, in support of one of our existing customers. At the time, it was Torrington Bearing. And then in 2003, another expansion also down south, just outside of Atlanta, in support of Pratt & Whitney and their spare parts operation down there.
And this goes back to the kind of thing you were saying earlier about you guys make some custom stuff. So your customer was like, "Hey, we need some help making this stuff down there. Can you guys open a place down there?"
Exactly. It helps, it helps to have a proven track record of success, and good relationships with people up north, and when they were looking to expand down south and reallocate some of their production and warehousing, they decided to take us along for the ride. And we've been down there for, like I said, 25 years approximately in both plants. Both plants continue to operate successfully. I was just down there about a month ago checking in, and it's been great. It's been great. And it's one of those things where once you have the geographic foothold, you have a plant in those locations, you service those customers, but you can also start to do other things, right? And a lot of times it's hard to get that critical mass for expansion. And when you're moving in partnership with an existing customer, it makes that much easier.
Yeah. Well, listen, I think both those moves were before your time.
Yeah, just slightly.
Yeah. I mean, because it's lucky there, because there's so many stories in manufacturing of a customer saying, "Hey, can you open this location here? Come with us there."
Yeah.
And then the business doesn't materialize.
Exactly, and that's part of the risk. But our business is on the materials and manufacturing side, and also on the services, so we're able to hedge that a little bit. And we've, I mean, to be successful in anything requires a good amount of luck, right? And I think we've certainly been lucky over our 71 years. You work from that.
Yeah, listen, well, I'm kind of a believer that you make your own luck, right?
course.
I mean, there's a little bit of it, but you got to put yourself in the right position.
Of course,
to capture
you got to
it.
be in the right spots.
So
Absolutely.
just let's talk a little bit more, because I do think it's sort of interesting what you guys do exactly.
Sure.
So like maybe just help kind of frame it up here. So what is something that needs to get packaged? And I mean, you were saying before, hey, no one wants to open up a box with some peanuts in it and see like an aircraft part, but it feels like it's a bit more than that.
For sure. So the Park City packaging business can be divided up kind of into two halves. You have our services side, and then you have the manufacturing oriented side. On the services side, people will send us parts. It could be a nut, a bolt, a blade disc for a jet engine. We will take it out of commercial or vendor packaging, compliance packet in accordance with either the OEM spec, a mill spec, contractual requirements, whatever it may be, and then ship that on to whoever. Could be overseas, could be somewhere near, could be somewhere far. That's on the services side. On the manufacturing side, we provide people with the materials to do that themselves. So instead of sending the components to us and we're going to do the full suite of packing and manufacturing, we give them the materials so that they can do the packaging themselves. That's typically been our relationship with some of our largest customers. Will be selling them materials, and then they have larger teams and infrastructure to where they can do the packaging themselves.
And you guys started off just doing the services side and added the manufacturing later on?
Exactly. Yeah. The genesis of the business has really been, we started as a contract packer, right? So people would send us materials. We would package them, however they wanted them to be done. And as we started to do that, and really, just after my grandfather purchased the business, he kind of came to the realization of, we're making all these materials in-house, right? We already have all this production capacity because we need it for our services side. Why not also sell these external? And there's a lot of companies, like I said, especially the larger ones, where they don't want to pay for freight necessarily to send all their material back and forth, but they still need the material, right? And packaging is not a core competency for some of these companies, especially small and mid-sized manufacturing. Hey, I'm really good at making this screw, right? Or I'm really good at making this aircraft part, but I don't want to have to worry about packaging, and I don't want to have to worry about cutting corrugated and sizing boxes and making wood crates. But we want a vendor who understands all that as well. And we found that in being a service provider, it's really helped fuel our manufacturing operation, because when you pick up the phone from one of these customers and they're like, hey, we have this part, we have this problem, we can't get it to work. We've already had the same problem with a similar part. You know what I mean?
Right.
We can relate to them on that direct level. And it's helped our relationships.
Yeah, when half your business is actually doing what it is that they're doing with your same exact materials.
Exactly.
So if they want to know, how do I package this? Someone in your operation knows how to do it because they're doing it for somebody else.
Exactly. You could walk out into the plant and find somebody packaging a similar part. You know what I mean?
And even though you weren't around for it, I don't know if you've had any conversations, it's an interesting thing to say, like, hey, this could cannibalize our core business, right? So if initially you're mostly just doing the services, when you then start training your customer to do the packaging themselves, probably eats into your business at that point.
Yeah, a little bit. But I think it's one of those things where the larger companies, right, they were attempting to do it inside. We're never going to be having, we don't expect to have, GE Aerospace sending us all of their parts to our plant to pack. I mean, it's just not the nature of the business anymore. And we realized that the smaller companies, the mid-sized companies, they don't want to deal with any of it, right? They don't want to deal with the packaging, the materials, any of the labor. But the larger companies, they did have that need for the materials. And I think that was really insightful and smart by my grandfather, my father, and seeing that. And that allowed us, really good growth and an area to expand the business and really pivot to manufacturing.
Yeah, and now the business is about 50-50?
I would say it's 65-35 manufacturing heavy.
Oh, wow. So that pivot really has done a lot for the business.
Yeah. And a lot of the services side, the contract packaging, we'll describe it. You're at the whims of the government, right? So they change packaging requirements all the time.
Do they?
They had a big commercial packaging initiative where, people struggle to get the mil specs right and stuff like that. So we're going to go back to packing peanuts, like you were saying earlier. And, you have people opening up their parts, like we talked about, and they don't like what they see inside the box. And we've seen it in the last 5 years, kind of a transition back to, more stringent military packaging requirements. And we've seen our business pick up on that side of things, reflective of that.
It's such a crazy thing, right? Like, it's just not something I even think about.
Yeah.
But you're telling me that it sort of seems like a set it and forget it. Like, that's how you package it and you let it go. But those are changing regularly?
Yeah, yeah. Every time the government issues a new contract for whatever they're buying, there's unique packaging requirements in there, and we see those evolve over time. And we've absolutely seen them become more complex recently.
Because like what I've just got so many questions.
Yeah,
What
we got
sort of
nothing but time.
like what would drive that? Like what's the reason you gotta?
Well, I mean, think about it. If you have, let's say we're selling mugs, right, in a store, we can just go grab it right from Target.
Yeah.
But if we need to get that mug to, an aircraft carrier in the Pacific, you can't package it the same way. You know what I mean? It's got to be in a water resistant corrugated container. It could be getting kicked out of a helicopter to some special forces group deployed God knows where. And they need it to work just as well as if you're getting it off the shelf at Target. And we make sure that happens.
So, okay, so I get it, right? You can't, the way you package a ceramic coffee mug to send to a Target shelf isn't the same thing you could do to package up, like, I don't have any idea, but I'll call this like some type of like a new hose for the engine of like an insert boat, like a fast boat that's got to get dropped into some jungle somewhere.
Sure.
I get that. But like, once you understand the box that you need to drop that thing into the jungle, why do you ever need to change it again?
Cost, you know what I mean? The government is ultimately paying that, right? So more expensive packaging is all part of part acquisition. And the government loves to try and save money working every day on that. So we've seen that over time, try and cut defense spending and things like that. And packaging is a great way to save costs in the near term. And then they ultimately pay for that in the long term when things get broken.
Things get broken.
Exactly.
So so I get it. So someone in some room somewhere with some spreadsheets like, oh wow, we're spending 18% of the cost of this part on packaging. That's insane.
Exactly.
The UPS store could do this or whatever.
For sure.
Can we cut this back, and if we can change the packaging this way or that way, we'll save 5% on the part acquisition.
Of course.
And then that flows down and no one has any idea how it works. Then you drop a few parts, they break, and that 5% ends up costing you 200%.
Exactly. It's
and
like
then the change comes back.
Of course. It's like anything. It's like all, good ideas, there's applications where that makes all the sense in the world. And there's parts that you definitely want that extra level of protection for sure.
So when in what you guys are doing, do you find that it's really just reacting to somebody else's design as opposed to you sort of coming up with new bespoke concepts of how to package stuff? Like, you get the difference there?
Yeah, absolutely. Whether it's commercial packaging spec, let's say something for Pratt & Whitney, that's all laid out, right? So we build to the blueprint. We work with Pratt & Whitney engineers, things like that. They typically design the packaging. We'll sometimes provide feedback, and in the past we have also designed. But we're typically just executing to a blueprint and aggregating the materials and manufacturing. On the military side, somewhat similar. Each package comes with instructions, and then we're typically manufacturing to that.
So for the most part, you're taking somebody else's design and then putting it together.
Correct. We have engineering in-house to do that if we need to, and there are certainly circumstances where we need to design our own packaging, or if it's not to spec. But the majority of what we do is to spec. Yeah,
it comes from somebody else.
For sure.
And so when you think about the sort of the special sauce that you guys put into it, is it just sort of like know-how and expertise over time then?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. The specs and regulations are pages and pages and pages and pages. And, we've gone on many field trips from one spec to the next spec to the next spec. And, that's why people don't want to deal with it, and it's really, we know what to do. And it helps when you have such a long history of performance, right? We don't have to flip through the specs every day, even though we still do. It just saves time and you're just more efficient.
Yeah. Listen, I mean, that in and of itself is like a huge barrier of entry, right? Like that level of like detail and understanding is just a huge barrier of entry that you guys got.
Yeah. And we've seen, especially in small and medium-sized manufacturing, businesses are always looking for new markets, right? They're always looking for new places they can sell their goods. And we find that the government is buying everything, right? The government is a huge operation. They're buying everything that people make. But a lot of people don't know how to sell to the government. They don't have the materials, to package it in a compliant way, and they don't have that know-how. And we found that, we allow people to kind of open that up as a market, where they were previously unable to sell to the government, and we help facilitate that.
So say more about that, because actually, as you were talking, I was just thinking to myself, one of the nice challenges, one of the benefits of having this like kind of, I'll call it sort of the competitive moat, right?
Sure.
Like there's just these huge barriers of
exactly
entry.
What it is, yeah.
Yeah, so that's great, but a lot of times when you build yourself a big moat, the downside is it's hard to really expand the business at some point, right? Because you got to get into this niche, and then that niche is only so big, and
exactly.
That's okay, right? You can make a good business, but the growth sort of stops. And it just sounds like you're sort of trying this other approach, which is we might not be able to grow the market ourselves, but if we can help new customers get into our market, then we benefit from the market growth. Is that the concept?
Exactly. And we've seen so many people to where they have a great manufacturing operation. They're making things that the government wants to buy, but they're spooked by the process. They're burdened by the compliance. They don't understand it. And we've tried to explain to them, and we do, and many times successfully, that, hey, if you partner with us, we have the know-how, the materials, the manufacturing capacity to allow you to unlock this market. And we've allowed a lot of these companies to be quite successful.
Could you share an example? I don't, you can change the names to protect the innocent.
Yeah, let's see. So there are one of our good companies, Jeff, who I was just speaking with the other day. They have transitioned, and now they're exclusively selling to the government. So they aggregate parts. They'll send them to us. We do the full thing. They never even touch them. So they operate out of more of an office complex like this.
Okay.
And they can be asset light. They buy and sell. They send to us, and then we move them right along.
And they weren't selling to the government when you first introduced?
They've grown over time. Yeah, they've grown over time.
And so you're finding that, hey, you got somebody who makes something already, or in this case, resells something.
Yeah.
And they want to be able to sell that to the government, but the packaging is a real barrier of entry.
Yeah. Big limiting factor. I mean, you need a lot of space to bang wood crates together, and, to make corrugated containers, you have a lot of plant and equipment involved. I was over in our Bridgeport facility this morning, which is where we do all of our corrugated manufacturing. And it takes up a lot of space, and it's we like to think of ourselves as a force multiplier for these people, right? Who, it's just not economically viable to have all that production in house, and it's not something like you could just go to Uline, online and buy it. We really, allow people to kind of unlock that.
Yeah, no, for sure. Right. I mean, it's funny, right? You look around at everything that we have got packaged somewhere, right?
Yeah, of course.
Like even the furniture you buy comes in some level of packaging, and someone's got to do it. So yeah, there you go, filling a need.
Yeah.
So, I mean, as I've referenced a couple of times, you're clearly a lot younger than the business.
Sure.
I'd just be really interested to know kind of how you got into it.
Yeah.
And let's talk about that. Cause I mean, from the first time I heard your voice on the phone, and we were talking about it, I was like, this dude loves what he does, which is kind of wild. Cause I can't imagine growing up, you're like, I'm into making boxes.
Yeah, for sure. So my background is actually in aviation. So I worked after school. I worked for an air charter operator, doing operations there. Really fast paced.
Like private flights.
Yeah, like private was specifically it was private helicopter charter. So I worked for a lot of good perks with that. Free helicopter rides never hurt. So I worked for two companies there.
This is like for private transportation for high net worth individuals.
Yeah, high net worth.
So, as opposed to like a New York City helicopter tour opper.
Both. Some of the companies have a charter wing, and then they'll also do sightseeing.
Okay.
That was the case with the companies that I worked for.
Oh, cool.
So really cool, fun, high paced, fast paced environment. Learned a lot there about, working with all different types of people, valuable experience. I did work for Park City, in high school. It was kind of just a one summer job, and then went on to do other summer jobs. And, I think in the back of my head, it was always my plan to work for Park City.
Oh, nice.
But I found it to be important to get that outside experience first, right? I think I could have graduated school and just gone right into, working for the family business. But I think, for myself, it was important to, go out and get outside experience, in something different and somewhat related, being aviation. But I found that to be important. And then during COVID, just kind of worked out to be good timing. The helicopter charter business obviously wasn't operating at its peak, and was living in New Jersey at the time, and the distance was becoming a little bit difficult. And made the move back to Connecticut and with Park City, and plan to be here for the long haul.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So growing up, this was your thought process was, I'd like to join the family business.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that, I'm very fortunate that my father, my grandfather, I think for sure wanted me to be a part of it, but fortunate to not have that be my only option or feel a lot of pressure in that. And I think that that's really important in terms of being successful, right? If you feel like you're forced into something, or you don't have an option, or you don't have a chance to kind of go out and prove it on your own first, I just don't know if you're setting yourself up for success. So I was fortunate to kind of have that as my environment coming up for sure.
Yeah, well, that's so funny. It reminds me of the Red Sox conversation we had right before it starts,
Yeah.
right? You don't want to force something, because the more you try and force it, the less
Exactly.
something to do it.
Especially when you're a teenager. You tell me to do this, I'm going that way.
Exactly.
Always the case.
Yeah. So I'd be interested. There's a lot of people that I know listen to the show who have kids and own a small, mid-sized, maybe in some cases a large manufacturer. And I've spoken to some of them, and they think about, man, I'd love my kid to be interested.
Yeah.
But think about, how do I sort of navigate this in a way where I encourage but don't sort of overdo it? So it sounds like you got some experience there that might help people.
Yeah, for sure. And like I said, I think it's important to provide the exposure, but not like a coercive force. You know what I mean? I have friends and have had experiences where people feel like that's their only option. There's a lot of pressure to be that next generation. There's the phrase, first generation starts it, second generation grows it, third generation runs it into the ground.
That's right.
So as third generation, I'm very aware of that. And I think as I was making my decision whether I was going to come on to Park City, I was, I'm like, wow, I got all this pressure on me here, but I'm confident that we're going to be able to make it happen. And,
what did your grandfather and father do to, like, if you remember sort of growing up, what were some of the things that happened to introduce you, to give you the opportunity to see it so it's not foreign,
For sure.
but without forcing?
Yeah. I mean, being a family business, of course, it's conversation around the dinner table. And some of my earliest memories are down in Atlanta when they were, bringing that plant online, and my dad had lived down there for 6 months, to bring that plant online and get everything set up. And I remember, going down on trips with him and kind of seeing that just from a very young age.
He took you with him.
Yeah,
So
a couple times.
you were pretty young.
Yeah, very young, very young. I remember my sister was even younger than me, and going down to see the plant, and it's just all big machines, and I have no idea what's going on, and I'm riding on the bulldozer and that type of thing.
That must have been awesome.
It was awesome, and it creates it wasn't that's not why I was down there, right?
Sure.
But it creates, fond memories and, a positive association. And, he's been fortunate to have a lot of success in the business, and, our whole family, my aunt works for the business as well. And we all take, a lot of pride in it. And it's something that is important to us and was important to my grandfather. And, we cherish it.
You heard around the dinner table or whatever, different things your dad and your grandfather, I guess, talking about what was going on.
Yeah. And I working in aviation prior to this, and in charter, was very logistics heavy, right? You're moving aircraft from here. You got to get this timing right. And it's an elaborate dance, right?
Actually, I wouldn't mind for you to touch on that a little bit, because I was going to try and connect those things too. I know a little bit about sort of the charter business, and
Sure.
It's so difficult, right?
Yeah.
Because you want to move people from A to B, but you also, if everyone only wants to go from A to B, you're flying from B back to A with no one on it. So
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Very challenging. And,
fuel will kill you.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that a lot of the things that I learned, fuel, huge expense, of course. And I think a lot of the things that I learned in the aviation and my operations position there about, there we're moving people, right? How do we get these people from here and pick up these people there and do it in an efficient way? Here we're making material and we have to move it in an efficient way, right? And get the timing right. And I think that that's been helpful, in my current role in terms of, just the logistical understanding. That was my grandfather's background as well, in logistics and distribution for large companies prior to purchasing Park City.
So actually, I never even asked you this previously, but I'm going to ask you now. Your grandfather didn't work for Park City when he bought it?
No, he
just was out of the business entirely, and just the previous founder was looking to exit, and he just
was getting older, looking to retire. And my grandfather had worked for many years in Manhattan for various businesses, worked for Pfizer, worked for Clairol, Seagram's. Typically in like distribution roles, high level distribution roles in logistics, and got tired of the commute to Manhattan, as I think anybody would, and wanted something he could kind of grow himself.
Was he living in Connecticut at the time?
He was, he was commuting back and forth, living in Fairfield, and he wanted something that he could make his own, and it's hard to make these large companies. You have an impact, but it's like steering a cruise ship.
Yeah.
And Park City was his passion, and he grew it, right up until his last days, and it was it's something he was very proud of for certain.
So when you're doing the charter, and then is your dad sort of regularly sort of being like, hey, Owen, do you want to come back?
Yeah.
Or did you call him up and be like, hey man, I think it's time? Or how
Yeah,
did that?
no, it was more my grandfather. He'd be like, how's that helicopter business?
Really?
Yeah, we got a desk with your name on it type of thing, and, and that was good. And super cherished my dad. And, we had lots of good conversations about my work experience there. And, he would bounce Park City things off of me. And I think eventually it just came to the point of let's just do this full time,
What did you start off doing when you came in?
Operations at a lower level, typically just in Stratford, whereas now I have responsibility for all four plants.
And you found that what you did with the helicopter, that experience was really translated well?
Yeah. And I think that the helicopter operation was a much younger business. I think it was 5 or 6 years old at my time there.
Yeah.
Very fast paced culture
Yeah.
and not a manufacturing operation.
No.
And I think that, when you have a business that right now is 71 years old, when I started a little bit younger, there's things that need updating and, can be changed and we can be more efficient. And it helps to have somebody kind of come in with both fresh energy and also outside experience. You know what I mean? And right away we found things that we were able to improve and kind of make more efficient. And, I hope I still have that carry that same energy through today. I think I do.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it is nice to come in with fresh eyes, right?
Yeah,
Because you see things differently.
Of course.
So when you think about kind of running operations now, how much of your time is spent? Well, maybe ask this question. When I think about running operations in manufacturing business, I'm thinking about sort of two different angles of it, right? There's like the machinery operation technology
Sure.
component, and then there's like the people to run the machine component, right? Because you need both.
Sure.
Is that how you think about it? Are there when you think about the ops, how do you bucket it?
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, you need both to be firing on all cylinders, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when I'm dealing with all four plants now, we lean very heavily on our general managers, right? So corresponding with them, making sure that they have the equipment that they need, making sure that they have the manpower that they need. And as far as where do I spend my time, I was at our Bridgeport plant this morning, out on the floor, talking to people, working with people on the forklift, and I think that is important to, you kind of get a pulse of what's going on, right? If you're just, in an office somewhere locked away, it's hard to know, hey, this machine is broken, or hey, we need to give attention to this. I was at Bridgeport also yesterday with our general manager, Steve, and we were looking at a machine and we're like, wow, it's got this going on and this going on. And, if you're not there, it's sometimes hard to know, you know what I mean? And that's been, a key part of kind of how I roll it. And I'm out on the floor, I'm in a cubicle, I'm not in an office somewhere. And I think that's a big part of Park City culture, is just making sure that management is accessible, right? And that kind of speaks to the family dynamic that we try and, maintain in the business.
Get out there. And so how do you think of the balance? So you talked a little about the machinery.
Yeah.
How it's sort of engaging with the people side of the business. I mean, do you do all the same stuff at all four plants aside from sort of the corrugated manufacturing? Like, how do you think about managing that?
Yeah, each plant has every plant does packaging services. So we package at every plant.
Yeah.
And then each plant has like a manufacturing specialty. So we'll do, let's say, wood products in Stratford. We do corrugated in Bridgeport, kind of that situation.
Got it.
And in the last year, I've really picked up the cadence of travel to all the plants, and especially down south. And kind of getting that communication has been super valuable about, hey, they do this way in South Carolina, and that's so much better than the way that we do it in Stratford. Why don't we do it that way? You know what I mean? And to be able to have that cross communication and that physical presence everywhere is so helpful. And we've already seen dividends on that just this year.
And so is that something that you facilitate personally?
Yeah. We encourage our managers to travel. And I've been certainly doing a lot of traveling this year as well.
So if you see that someone's doing something well in South Carolina, you tell the GMs from the other facilities, hey, go check out what.
Yeah. Or get on a Teams call or link up with them. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, listen, we're one company, right? So I think
but that's hard.
Yeah. I know. And it's about creating that culture to where people can feel, accepted and sharing ideas, and it's important to remember that just because we have 4 plants, we're all one company, right? So we're all moving in the same direction, and a rising tide lifts all ships.
Yeah. And so have you been successful in sort of building that culture, even like sort of pre, post, during and post COVID, making it feel like we've got these like 4 facilities that are one company as opposed to 4 different companies?
Yeah. And I think we've made a lot of strides recently, and, it's amazing the impact of just having people in the same room. You know what I mean? We're here in person, obviously, and it's, Teams and Zoom are helpful tools, but I think that just in terms of, getting on the same page with somebody on a human level, it's just so helpful to be across the table with them, and we had a big meeting yesterday in our conference room, and it's just, people can be so busy, in their day-to-day routines, especially the GM level, where you're constantly moving. And it's helpful to just take a minute and be like, hey, let's all get on the same page about either a topic or just a general catch up. And, it's just helpful for morale as well, I think.
And what have you seen from like an employee retention and, perspective in the business?
Yeah. I mean, our employee retention is something we're super proud of. Our average tenure is 11 and a half years. I think the national average is somewhere around 4.5. So, and that's something that I view as very much linked to Park City being a family business, right? They know what they're going to get with our family. We treat them as family, and, we want everyone to be able to come in, work, be respected, feel respected, and to have success, and we had, a woman retire just when I started. She was employed, I think, 52 years with the company. It was the only job she ever had. And so a lovely woman. And, we have a lot of stories like that, people 20, 30 years. And we've been fortunate to be able to provide employees, growth. We have 4 GMs, and 3 of the 4 rose from entry-level positions, all within the company. And we're super proud of that too, and that speaks to ability to motivate people. And if people see a credible growth path, then they work to that, you know what I mean? And it helps you to, have your leaders be somebody that you know what I mean? As opposed to some outside force coming in and it's just a revolving door.
Yeah, that is really good. And so how do you think about building that growth path? Because that is so important, right? I mean, companies got to grow for multiple reasons, but one of them is if you want to retain your employees, I think you got to show them an opportunity to grow. Otherwise, they got to go somewhere else.
Of course, yeah. And I think that having roles, expectations, and goals for everyone is super helpful as well. I think that when people know what the target is, they're able to work to that, right? And we encourage everyone to have all 3 of those things laid out, right? If I go up to somebody, they should be able to provide those answers. And I think that
to which 3 questions?
Roles. What are your roles? What are your expectations? And what are your goals?
Got it.
And I think that the goals component is really important. You know what I mean? And people need to be, people need to aspire to things, right? And that might not be running the company or, doing whatever. But, to be just a little bit better every day. I think it's people, you work to a mission,
How do you think about sort of like training and helping folks to it's one thing to have a goal, but how do you support them in reaching those goals?
Yeah, for sure. So we recently joined the aerospace component manufacturers, which is a business trade group. I think you've mentioned on the podcast
I've
before.
heard of it,
Yeah, great group. And, there's training that they offer and workshops and stuff. And we've been, looking at actively participating in that. And then we do a lot of training on the job. Our business is somewhat niche, so there's not tons of places we can send people for training, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think we do a really great job at, frankly, all 4 of our plants in training people within, and budding them up with somebody and maybe a shadow on a machine or a process or some aspect of technical compliance. And, we really try and do as much of that inside as we can, in addition to the stuff we do outside.
It sounds great, Owen, and it really seems like you love what you're doing.
Yeah, no, it's been great. It's been great, and nice to get out and do things like this as well. And connect here is always fun.
No doubt.
Get out of the plants every once in a while, always good.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Well, listen, man, I'm going to wrap it up by asking you a few like kind of last questions.
Sure.
That I like to ask all the guests. Put together a little list here, which is,
Sure.
Do you have a favorite business book?
I do. So I actually read it very recently. It was the Elon Musk biography by Walter Isaacson. Both people fascinating, quite frankly. Walter also very fascinating. And it's really a book about manufacturing, to be honest, and hearing the stories about Tesla and SpaceX and the algorithm that Elon kind of came up with for manufacturing is super fascinating. And obviously the pace and intensity at SpaceX and Tesla, a little bit different than Park City, but definitely a lot of takeaways from that.
Although you might package some of the stuff that they need.
Exactly. Yeah. Send it over to SpaceX for sure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What's something, Owen, that you learned early in your life or earlier in your career that you think's really helped you succeed?
I think that my father told me I used to play hockey growing up. And we'd be driving back from games, and it wouldn't matter whether we won or lost. It was all about effort, right? It was how much effort did you put in? And I think that's one of the things that you can control. You can control how much effort, and it doesn't matter if you're good at something, bad at something, an expert. You could be first day on the job, last day on the job. If you gave 100%, then that's all you can do, and you can sleep well at night. And if you're giving 100% effort all the time, then good things will come.
Yeah, that goes back to making your own luck, right?
Exactly.
Like if you do good things will happen.
Of course.
And you're still early in your life and career, but I will ask you the question: what's something that you learned so far in your career that you tell young Owen you think it'd really benefit him if he listened to you?
I think that people solve all of your problems. I think that sometimes, especially when you're in more of a managerial role, people are sometimes the source of your problems, but the right people fix all problems, and I think that younger Owen might have been, wanting to go it alone, or I'll just do it myself. It's easier for me to just handle it. And part of growing up has been learning that you have to have trusted people who can, help you along the mission, right? And people you can lean on and people who know what they're doing. And it's the only way to run a business, right? You can't do it yourself.
How do you think about identifying those right people to make sure that like, oh, this is the right guy, this is the right gal? Like, how do you think about that?
Yeah. I mean, proven track record of success, right? These are people who, you work with, and we'll give people projects. I can think of a couple that I have some people back at the office working on for me right now. And, you see if they can deliver. I mean, it's simple as that, and those people get elevated up, and people who struggle are, maybe stay where they are. And, you always want the good people to continue to rise as high as they can go. You don't want to be someone who limits people's growth, and you want to make sure that you can provide those opportunities for people to shine.
Amen to that.
Yeah.
Owen, it has been an absolute pleasure having you on. Your energy is infectious.
Thank you.
I think great things are going to continue to happen to Park City, and I look forward to following you, making them happen.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.
Made in America with Ari Santiago is brought to you by Compass MSP.